On your homework last night, we had one like this. This is a quadratic formula question. All right, you probably all know the quadratic formula. The x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But you may not have any idea what it is or what you're doing when you use it. So let me talk it over with you for a second. Notice this equation is a quadratic. Why? Because it's got a little 2 in it, a little squared. That can tell you that it's a quadratic. All right. If the highest power is a 2, then it's a quadratic. Now quadratics, you remember what shape they are? We did the parent quadratic parabola, right? It's a U shape. So the y would normally be where the 0 is. And that means that I set y equal to 0. Do you remember a really important statement I gave you at the beginning of the year? That the x-intercept is where what? Y is 0. That's what I'm doing here. I'm finding the x-intercepts because I'm putting in y as 0. So x-intercepts are, if you graphed it, it's where it would touch on the x-axis. So imagine this parabola, and let's say it looks like this. It's going to touch 2 times. That's why you had 2 answers for your question, because you're finding the x-intercepts, which is where it touches, and usually it's 2. If the parabola is up here, then the x-intercept would only have 1 x-intercept. And technically, if it's up here, it wouldn't touch at all, and then you have to start talking about imaginary stuff. We'll be dealing with that later. Right now, I'm going to try to just go back to what happens when I plug in the numbers. Well, I've done this one. I stuck in 3 for A, 5 is B, and C is -4. You can see them here and here and here. And I stuck them in, and I got these numbers. And I kept going, and I actually cheated a little bit right here because it wasn't working out nice. So I made it 81 because it did work out nice in your homework. So square root of 81 comes out to 9. And from here, this is the part that I want to show you. A lot of people get to this part and they don't know what to do. Well, it's got a plus or minus in it. Well, it's almost like, well, decide, do I do plus or do I do minus? Well, what you do is you do it once with plus, and then you do it once with minus. And then you get 2 answers. And why do we need 2 answers? Because there's 2 things where places where it touches. Makes sense. All right, so now let's do this one with the minus. I'd have -5 minus 9 would be -14 over 6, which reduces. And then the other one, if I do it with plus, would be -5 plus 9, which would be +4 over 6, which would also reduce. And there is my 2 answers. Okay, I just want to remind you how those worked because that's on your review that you have for tonight's homework. This is a little reminder of what we did in class yesterday, which was learning how to calculate these P's and C's, permutations and combinations, by hand. I'm going to show you today how to use a calculator later. But right now, I just want to practice it by hand. So would you please, on your sketch paper, answer those 2 right now. I'll pause the video while you're answering them. So you had 5 factorial over 5 minus 3 factorial, which gives us 5 factorial over 2 factorial, which gives us 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 over 2, 1. Cancel, cancel. The answer is 5 times 4 is 20 times 3 is 60. Raise your hand if you had that right. Excellent. There are some people that didn't. I hope you know what your mistake was. Okay, if you don't, ask me for more help later. Let's do the other one. It's going to be a lot like it. Still 5 factorial over 5 minus 3 is 2 factorial, but there's one big but, so to speak. What is it? This has to also go down here. When you're doing a C, you also need one of those on the bottom. Why? Because our answers for the combinations is always smaller, and this part, by dividing by something more, when you divide by something you make it smaller, right? So this answer was 60. This answer ends up being, well, I can tell. It's going to be 3 factorial. It's going to divide whatever my answer was by 3 factorial, which is really 3 times 2 times 1, which is 6. So it should be 6 times smaller, so my answer should be 10. Was it 10? Good. And I could do that by hand if I wanted to, but I think you get the idea. I suppose. Or 2 times 1, 3 times 2 times 1, and then these cancel and these cancel, and 5 times 4 is 20 over 2, which is 10. Okay. Now try it with just variables. This is called increasing the level of abstraction. Okay. So hopefully you said n factorial over n minus r factorial. And then what? One more thing, r factorial. And by putting them next to each other, I assume this, but there's a times in there, in case you don't know. Okay, moving on. This is kind of the sum it all up problem, just like we did yesterday, except this one has a little bit more complication because there's 4 contestants. And it's Mick, Peg, Susan, Dave. And over here, Mick, Peg, Susan, Dave. In this one, for permutations, I have first and second place, implying the order matters. Like if Mick gets first place, that's different than if Peg had gotten first place, right? And over here, I have this arrow with the Mick and the Peg because it's a combination, and in combinations, the order does not matter. So Mick or Peg or Mick doesn't matter because if they get sent on to state, they're both happy. They don't care. Well, they might care, but in this case, it matters more that they both get to go on to state. So I'd like you to make a quick list. There's more than 10 of them over on this side, and there's less than 10 of them on this side because this is combinations. Make me a list. I gave you the first one in the list, Mick and Peg. Good point. I'll pause it. I think some of you guys are probably done here. How many did we have on this side? 12. 12 is correct. If you didn't find 12, you missed a few. Okay? Over on this side, 6 combos. Does it make sense that the number of combinations would be 6 compared to the permutations of 12? Who can give me a simple explanation for why it would be 6 versus 12? It'd be really easy to make the 6 into a 12, right? Kobe. And so if order doesn't matter in combinations,
so that you could have Mick or Peg.
In every one of those, like Mick or Peg, could be reversed and done the opposite way, like Peg and then Mick. So your 6 things would instantly become 12 if you just reverse them all, right? So that's why there's the difference. Okay. Now, if we had to do this by hand, I've already checked that with you. Would this be the right way to do it? It's off a little bit. Why? Be 4 contestants with 2 places. Okay? And would this have been right? No, same idea. There were 4 contestants. Choose 2. And the order didn't matter here because it's a C. All right. Enough about that. I just want to kind of sum this up for you. You need to know that this is the number of contestants to pick from, and this is how many spaces or slots that you have. So if this was 5P3, that could mean, for instance, that I've got 5 people running a race and there's 3 places that they could come in. All right? And P versus C is just the difference between permutation and combination, which is one, the order matters, the P, and the other one it doesn't. Okay. Pizza. Hungry yet? All right. So at Devani's, these are some toppings they have available. I'll save you some time. There's 16 of them there. From what I just told you seconds ago, we need to figure out what letter to use, P or C. And the first one is how many contestants there are, and the second is how many we're going to choose. Is this a P or a C? C. You guys all said C, and that's good, or most of you did. And C means that order doesn't matter. I'll give you an example. If you call up the Devani's place and you say, I'd like to get a sausage, pepperoni, pizza. And they say, no. Actually, I want the pepperoni sausage pizza. And be like, what? It's the same thing. There's no difference, right? So the point is the order doesn't matter. Okay, so if we just want 2 toppings and the order doesn't matter, I use a C. How many choices do I have? 16, and I'm going to choose 2. There you go, 16C2. All right, now these numbers are going to get bigger and nastier and harder to compute by hand, so I'm going to show you at this point how to use your calculator to do it. So actually, I'll do that on the next video because this one's going to run out of time.